test your English with this video. Today we're in London and I'm going to speak from an A1 beginner level all the way up until a C2 upper advanced level. Let's find out how much English you can understand.
What's your name?
My name is James.
Where are you from?
I'm from Oxford in the UK.
What is your favourite colour?
My favourite colour is blue.
Do you have any pets?
I do not have any pets.
What do you usually do on the weekends?
On the weekends, I usually do some work. I usually go to the gym and I try to find something interesting to do every weekend.
Can you describe your daily routine?
My daily routine, I suppose I usually wake up around 8 a.m. In the morning. I like to brush my teeth and then usually I get breakfast around 8:30 and then start my day. I usually work from 9 until 6 p.m. and usually I'll go to the gym after that. The rest of the evening, I just relax.
Do you prefer summer or winter?
I would say that I prefer summer because in my country, the UK, you get really long evenings in the summer. So that's why I prefer summer.
What did you do last weekend?
Last weekend, I went to a town called Reading and actually I filmed another video kind of like this one.
What are the advantages and disadvantages of living in a big city?
So there are a number of advantages and disadvantages of living in a big city. Actually, living in a big city is kind of a double-edged sword, right? It's a bit of a double-edged sword. When you're in a big city, there's a lot more things to do, like more social life, more people you can meet, and a lot more events that you can go to. On the downside, sometimes in big cities there can be more crime, right? It's more dangerous, more crime, and also you don't know other people. Everybody is a stranger to you. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of living in a big city. Yeah.
What hobbies would you like to try in the future?
There's one hobby that I really want to try in the future, and that is martial arts. Okay, martial arts. I haven't decided what type of martial arts yet, but I would definitely like to try that because it seems like a lot of fun.
Do you think it's important to learn foreign languages?
I would say yes. I think that everybody in their life at least once should learn at least one foreign language. Obviously, English is probably the best choice because English is a language you can use all over the world. So yeah, everybody should try to learn at least one foreign language in their life. If you want to learn 3 or 4, that's great, but 1 is enough, I think.
Do you agree or disagree? Social media has a negative impact on society.
That's quite an interesting question. I would say that I agree with that statement. I would say that overall, all things considered, I would say that social media has probably had an overall negative effect on society, in my opinion. Obviously, there are some upsides to social media. Being able to stay connected with your friends and family, even people that you haven't spoken to in a long time, you can stay connected with them. But I think, especially for teenagers, it's been difficult. I don't think it's good that the people are always looking at pictures of their friends who are showing their, what we call their highlight reel of their lives. it appears that people are doing so well, and I think it's not really, generally it's not that healthy for people's mental state, I would say. So it's, for most people, it's probably good to limit the amount of time they spend on social media. So to conclude my answer, social media is probably what we call a net negative, probably, I would say. Yeah.
Should government invest more in public transport?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I'm happy to live in Europe. Now, in Europe, we have quite a lot of public transport. I have visited countries like the USA, and I have to say that the public transport in the USA leaves a lot to be desired, right? It leaves a lot to be desired. And I think public transport is important because it means that you can walk around everywhere. You don't need to always get in the car every time you want to go somewhere. So yeah, governments should definitely consider spending some of their budget or a lot of their budget on creating good public transport systems so that people can easily get from A to B when they need to without having to hop in a car every single time.
What factors influence a person's career choice?
Obviously, there are a number of factors that would affect somebody's career choice. Perhaps their personality would be one. I would say that people's personalities kind of dictate which career they are likely to end up in. If you're somebody who is maybe very creative, naturally, you'll be more likely to end up in a more creative role. If you're somebody who prefers more technical things, then you may be more likely to end up in a role like a software developer or in IT or something like that. And of course, something else that determines your career choices is the family that you grew up in. If you grow up in a rich family, you'll likely have more opportunities than somebody who grew up in a poorer family. So that's obviously a big factor as well.
To what extent should freedom of speech be limited in modern society?
I'm of the personal opinion that freedom of speech should be allowed for all people. However, there is a line that you cannot cross, and that is what we call the incitement of violence. Okay. So if you do say something like that you're going to try and incite violence or encourage other people to cause violence, then your freedom of speech should be limited at that point. That's what's called hate speech. But aside from that, if you're not, inciting violence or causing harm, real harm to people, then you should be able to say whatever you want. So I think it's important that citizens of countries are allowed to criticize their leaders and their presidents and their politicians. And any country that limits the freedom of speech is something negative in my opinion.
Discuss the long-term consequences of relying heavily on artificial intelligence.
One of the potential negative consequences of relying too much on artificial intelligence is that the human capacity to be able to think for ourselves may reduce over time. Okay, so to give an example, although it's not artificial intelligence, if you're somebody that uses Google Maps quite a lot, you may have found recently that you can't really keep direction by yourself, right? Now you need Google Maps to know where you are, and it could be the case that if we overuse AI too much, it's like something like ChatGPT to generate ideas, then we may lose the capacity to think of ideas ourselves. And so that's a potential negative consequence of overusing AI.
Does technological progress necessarily lead to moral progress?
Obviously, that is an incredibly profound question. I'm of the opinion that no, technological progress does not necessarily lead to moral progress, and there are a number of examples in the modern world that can demonstrate this phenomenon. Okay, if you take the new invention of a technology such as dating applications, for example, some examples of this would be Bumble and Tinder and so on. Have these led to moral progress? I think the answer is quite obvious, that it's no. Of course, dating apps have not led to moral progress. On the contrary, it's far more likely that they may have led to moral degeneration instead. I think it's rather likely that the invention of dating apps has led to perhaps an increase in infidelity, perhaps in marriage and other such things like that. And another negative consequence of the invention of dating apps is that people have generated a tendency to choose their partners based on rather superficial elements such as their appearance or height and so on, whereas before the invention of dating apps people may have been far more prone to choosing their partners based on less superficial elements. So I don't think that dating apps have led to moral progress. I think it's more likely that they may have led to a bit of moral degeneration. Take the invention of drones, for example. I think it's quite clear that the invention of drones has not really led to moral progress. I think it's far more likely it's led to moral degeneration. The fact that it is now possible for the military to neutralize or take out or kill people from a distance without having to do it personally, I think allows people to murder from a distance without having to be emotionally connected to the act. And I think, so those are two examples that demonstrate why technology definitely does not necessarily lead to moral progress. Yeah.
In what way does mass media shape or distort the public memory?
Well, this is a complex and profound question. It's definitely not a black and white issue. It's true that mass media can actually have an impact on what the public remembers or the public memory, as was put to me in this question. The first example to me that comes to mind is actually an example that arose in World War II. I think it's quite a common public opinion in a country like the United States, for example, that the reason that the Allies managed to defeat the Nazis is mostly down to the USA. That the USA came along and they defeated the Germans, right? This is quite a common public memory, as you put it, in America. And that's probably due to the mass media. There are so many movies that were released over the last few decades that portray America coming along and saving the day in World War II. But if you look at the facts of the matter, in reality, it was more a team effort between the countries of Russia, the UK and the USA. If you take the country of Russia, for example, they actually suffered by far the largest number of casualties during the war. And they also, they were the ones who invaded Germany and they arrived in Berlin. And so, but this part of history is not really portrayed, or has not really been portrayed very much in the American media. And so this actually affects the public memory of the United States. So this is an example of how mass media can actually affect what the public actually remembers about the past. Which level did you manage to understand from that video? Please tell us in the comments section. Tell us what level you reached during this video. And if you want more videos like this, be sure to check out EnglishSponge.com. If you want easier videos to watch, then check out this playlist here for the A1 beginner videos. If you want something a little bit more advanced, then check out this playlist, which is for our B2 upper intermediate videos. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.